there everyone, and special greetings to those who are additionally joining us online under the guise of the DMEU Saturday program on Zoom and also on YouTube. So this is coming to you today from Woking near London in the UK. And because we have quite a few different activities going on at the same time in several different languages, and we only have a certain amount of bandwidth on our internet, this talk is becoming a public talk, so it'll be shown around the world as well. Normally the DMEU is 1 hour long, so normally it runs between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. and the little class that we have during our weekend meditation retreat actually will be 2 hours long. So what I'm going to do today, hopefully to please everyone, especially for those who were hoping it was only going to be an hour long, is that we do a little bit of meditation first, and then I'll give a talk about contentment, which was one of the subjects which those on the retreat chose in quite large numbers, and then afterwards we'll finish off with a second short meditation. And today, because I've talked quite a lot about loving-kindness meditation, but haven't really gone into it very much, we will look at 2 different ways of spreading loving-kindness. So before the talk, we'll talk about spreading loving-kindness, starting with people who we are okay with, and then spreading loving-kindness to those we have more problems with, and then spreading loving-kindness to those we don't like. Yes. So that's like increasing levels of challenge, yes. And then afterwards we'll go back to the usual way of spreading loving-kindness, which is spreading loving-kindness towards those who are further away, yes. So there's 2 ways of doing loving-kindness, and we'll do both this evening, but one before the talk and one afterwards. So I'd like to encourage you. I think that even online we have only those who are experienced in meditation already. So we're going to sit for meditation now. We'll start off with a half an hour meditation, and most of that will be a loving-kindness meditation for those who would like to understand what's happening. And just as a little guider, normally when we're spreading loving-kindness, although it may seem like an emotion or just a thought or good wishes for others, but to connect with our practice, normally we spread it from our center in whatever form it may be, whether it's a feeling or a sense of brightness or even an image which we're spreading outwards. We spread it outwards from the center of our body, and that way it will link in seamlessly to the practice that we normally do, so that it's like expanding the center of your body as we do the practice. Yeah. So let's sit for some meditation now. We start by sitting up as straight as we can, so that we feel wide awake, but also relaxed. We can close our eyes very gently, allowing the whole of our body to relax, starting with the muscles of our face. Relaxing our neck, letting our shoulders drop to their natural height, before allowing that tide of relaxation to spread down through our arms, forearms, down to the tips of our fingers. From there we continue on down, relaxing our torso, especially the muscles across our tummy, relaxing our legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. whole of our body to relax and become restful more and more. And at this point you might imagine yourself sitting quietly, all alone, as if you were just spending a little time to relax yourself. Allowing the whole of your body to rest, become free of tension, while also allowing your mind to become free. And we might allow the mind to dance its own dance without constraining it. Not applying any force. The mind needs to think, we don't need to struggle against that. If it needs to daydream, then we're also able to accept that. Whatever the mind needs to feel, we allow it to do so, while remaining aware of what is happening, just as if we were watching clouds passing through the sky. And by doing so, the conscious and subconscious parts of the mind are drawn closer together. So we quietly observe the dance of the consciousness. As we allow the flow of energy to come down to the place inside us that feels the most comfortable and most content. Linking with our normal experience on the inside, whether it be something visual or something we can feel. Those who prefer to merely observe on the inside should pick the place which they are observing, that special space on the inside into which we allow the inner experience to flow, change, metamorphise. Allowing our mind to settle deeper and deeper, letting the thoughts gradually peel themselves away from the mind to leave a sense of peace and quiet. And when we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently and using no effort at all, we imagine that this body of ours is just an empty space or a hollow cavity. With no organs or tissues, muscles or bones. Or as if your whole body has been transformed into a sort of transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. And within this empty space of our body and mind, we can call to mind a picture of something bright shining like the sun, maybe a full moon or a star, possibly a sparkling diamond, about the size of a small and shining pearl. But this time we're relocating the image to a place within our own body, And we don't worry too much if the actual picture is not very clear. Even if it's vague, we accept it anyway. And we should bear in mind that for about half the people who meditate, it's going to be more of a feeling than a picture. In which case we can guide that object down within the space of our own body by how it feels. The warmth, or the shape and the texture of the object. We allow that object to gravitate slowly downwards within the space of our body. Almost as if we were slowly breathing the object down to the deepest point of our breath. And once it reaches the point that feels the most comfortable for us, deep down inside ourselves, we simply maintain the inner object at the center of ourselves as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, not letting our attention slip away anywhere else if we can help it. If we find our attention wandering away, then it's not the end of the world. We just bring our attention back again to the inner object. If the inner object disappears, then we just think of a new one. And once the imaginary object has found its proper place, as time goes on, it will pick up a sense of illumination, a sense of peace energy, or a feeling of well-being on the inside that spreads outwards more and more from that central point, until the whole of our body seems to shine forth with the same light or peace energy or sense of well-being. It's a light of peace and happiness and beauty that comes together with a sense of joy. And we just allow the whole of our body to grow, to be perfused by this feeling of well-being. And as we allow it to spread outwards, we can let it do so with a sense of loving kindness. And initially, we'll do this practice starting with those who are easy for us, and moving on to more challenging ones. So we start as we would with the usual loving-kindness meditation by perfusing ourselves with a sense of loving-kindness. Imagining ourselves with a pure, loving energy at the center of our body. Even if it doesn't take a specific form, you might imagine it as a warm or glowing light or energy that is at the center of yourself. And the idea is to spread a sense of love and compassion from the center initially to your whole body. The sense of self-compassion, love and kindness radiating out from our center, but reaching the whole of our body with a sense of being loved and being looked after, being soothed and comforted. We just take a moment and really bask in that loving energy, letting it open us up in a deeper way. Allowing ourselves to let go into that loving feeling while offering the affirmation to ourselves that may I be well and happy, may I be free of all suffering. And we can imagine our body being infused with this warm, caring, glowing energy. And we just get a sense of what that feels like to accept loving kindness from ourselves, while noticing any thoughts that might get in the way of that. Or if you find that difficult, or if you feel yourself objecting to being loved, just see if you can let go of those thoughts for a moment and see what it might be like to allow yourself to feel more of that love and to stay with that feeling just for a moment. And next we can think of someone who's very special to us, maybe a dear friend or a family member. We just bring to mind someone like that who's important to us and special in our lives. Picturing them in miniature at the center of our body. And we use our awareness to connect deeply at that person's center. The center of that person who's so dear to you. Recognizing that just like you, this person has hopes and fears. This person has joys and sorrows. Just like you, this person feels sad sometimes, gets lonely sometimes. And just like you, they really want to be loved and accepted, want to feel happy and safe. So we see if we can connect in some small way with that sense of being the same as that person on a deeply human level. We all suffer, we all want to be loved. And we imagine being able to send some of that loving energy to that person. From our center, we project warm, loving energy, perhaps offering some phrases such as, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you feel deeply loved and connected. And we imagine these good intentions projected together with a warm, loving energy. Perhaps imagining a golden, warm light flowing forth from our center and connecting with that person's center. As we send them loving kindness, compassion, and we might spare some thoughts for how we might engage with this person in real life, the qualities we might want to bring into friendship with this person, how we can demonstrate our sense of loving kindness to this person in real and concrete ways, through what we say to them or how we listen to them, how we behave when we're in their presence, just to get a sense of what that might look like. And next on our agenda, we bring to mind a purely neutral person, perhaps a vague acquaintance, perhaps someone we see quite regularly, perhaps even someone on the checkout in the supermarket, or someone who lives on the same street, or we see occasionally but don't really know. Or they might just be complete strangers, those faces in the crowd. And we bring the miniature image of someone like this to our center, considering that although we know virtually nothing about this person, and in many ways it may not seem that important to you, but we consider that just like us, this person too has hopes and fears. This person has joys and sorrows. This person gets sad sometimes, feels lonely sometimes. This person, just like you, wants to feel that they're loved and accepted. And they want to feel happy and safe. So again, just to know that in some deep fundamental way that you're the same as this person on a deeply human level, that you share common humanity with them, with all its joys and sorrows. We see what it might feel like to extend loving kindness to this person too. Imagine projecting goodwill and warmth and kindliness to this person that we usually might ignore or be indifferent to. Imagine emanating warm, loving energy from the center of our body to this category of people. Imagining warm, golden light flowing from our center, surrounding, engulfing the neutral people with a sense of warmth and love. We might consider how we might want to engage with such a person in our daily life, whether it's just exchanging brief eye contact, connecting with a smile, sending a sense of goodwill and kindliness to them in your thoughts, or perhaps paying them a little more attention next time we see them, in the way that we can maintain some sort of connection with this real person. And next on the list of categories for us is people who might be rather difficult for us. To start with, perhaps it's best to think of someone who's just slightly difficult. But as you repeat this exercise, you might gradually work up to spreading loving kindness to those who are really quite difficult and might otherwise bring up painful emotions for you. But for now, we just start with someone who's difficult in some way. A sense of discomfort there, perhaps concerning something they've done or said that's hurt you in the past. And as you think about this person, you consider that just like you, they too sometimes struggle with feelings of hurt or anger or disappointment. Perhaps the fact that you find them difficult is explained by the way they've had problems and difficulties in their life as well, that somehow cause them to behave in an unhelpful way. I'm sure all of us can recall ways that we ourselves have been caught by a difficult emotion and then said or acted in an unskillful way. And equally, that could have been painful for someone else. So, in many ways, this difficult person is just like you. They too have hopes and fears. They too feel sad and lonely sometimes. And just like you, they struggle sometimes with difficult emotions. Just like you, they'd like to feel loved and accepted, even if they may pursue that in unskillful ways. So it's an emotion we all share, the wish to feel safe and happy, We just experiment with allowing some of that love to be directed towards this difficult person as well, to see if we would be sufficiently courageous and willing to get past some of the hurt and spread some warmth and loving kindness towards this person. So now we just think about how we would like to engage with this person, how we'd like to interact with this person, if we decide that we want to interact with this person. If you make that decision that it is important for you to interact with them, how would we want that to look? What would we want to offer this person or bring to this relationship? We might think of concrete ways that we might be able to demonstrate our willing to engage, or our goodwill towards this person despite the things that may have had between us in the past. And we might decide that we don't want to interact with this person, and that's okay. The question is, if it is important for you to initiate a truce of some sort, how might we go about doing that? So now, just to get a sense of seeing all of these different sorts of person appearing at our center, our friends and loved ones, the neutral people that we don't feel so strongly about, for or against, and those difficult people too. Seeing all of them gathered there at our center, imagining being able to offer all of them a sense of love and kindness, and to ourselves as well. Spreading forth that golden, warm light, that peace energy, offering it to all these different categories of people. As we continue to practice this exercise, we can work on expanding out our goodwill, warmth, and kindness to wider and wider circles of people. We conduct our meditation in this way just for a few more moments in silence, extending our loving kindness to as many different categories of people as is comfortable for us for a few more moments in silence. Sappa Buddhanupavena, Sappa Dhammanupavena, Sappa Sankhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So we come temporarily to the end of our meditation for this evening, and we can turn to a little bit of our subject matter, which today is one of the topics that was requested by our weekend retreat group, which is that of contentment. And if I were asked to guess why it was a popular subject, it's probably connected with the idea that a sense of ambition and being a go-getter is so much emphasized in nearly everything we do in society, that in order to relax and to feel happy with what you have and where you are in life, sometimes it makes people feel quite guilty, although it's quite a good way to be able to relax oneself. So the idea of contentment being a virtue sometimes comes as a surprise to people, unless they are meditators, of course. Or the opposite of contentment, wanting more and never being content with what you have and always wanting to go for the next step up. Well, this is often the sort of transactional or goal-orientated approach that we have in the busy lives that we lead. But especially in the realm of spiritual cultivation, to have contentment is actually a very important tool in our repertoire in order to access to certain of the more elusive achievements which we are looking for in a spiritual cultivation. Especially in things like meditation, sometimes the more we hanker after results, the more difficult it is to find them. The more we chase after them, the further away they seem to be. Some people have described succeeding in something like meditation is rather more like planting a fruit tree, where if you're just interested in when is it going to have some fruit for me to eat, then you will be misdirecting your energies. Because really what you need to do if you want your fruit quickly is to water the plant, give it fertilizer, take good care of your tree, and the last thing on your mind should be what will happen at the end of all that when the fruit actually come out on the branches. Actually, you put all your effort into the roots of the tree, whereas the fruits of the tree actually appear above your head. So if you're constantly looking above your head, when are the fruits going to come out? Then actually the tree will probably be in quite bad health. So sometimes the place you put your efforts and where you see the results are in two different places completely. And meditation is very much the same. Sometimes it's been compared also to learning to play a sport. Because with certain sports such as tennis, I've heard that instead of worrying about where the tennis ball is going to go when you hit it on the other side of the net, most trainers put all their effort into teaching you just how to hit the ball with the correct technique. Because you hit the ball properly, then it will go where it needs to go. And it's, again, rather similar to meditation technique, where it's not the results you should be worrying about, but you should be worrying about whether you've understood the methodology correctly, because if you get the method right, then everything else will take care of itself. So rather similar to learning a new sport in many cases. So how does contentment fit into this? Firstly, we need to love ourselves as we are in order to want to work on ourselves. If we're going to constantly beat ourselves up or judge ourselves the whole time, we won't love ourselves enough to want to put effort into improving ourselves. So contentment is actually very important as a first step to bring ourselves closer to where we need to be in order to work with ourselves as we really are. Also, it saves us from hankering after the wrong sort of results and putting effort into things which don't actually lead to some proper outcomes. So contentment is sometimes maligned, even in Buddhist circles. They have a word for contentment which is santuti or santor. It means being happy with oneself, or it can mean happiness with oneself or one's possessions, and it particularly refers to knowing moderation. And in the scriptural languages, the word santuti or santor is a completely different piece of vocabulary from the words for laziness or the words for just sort of going off all on your own and not paying an interest to anyone else in society. Yeah? So, two different things. So what are the facets of contentment in the ideal world? You should be content firstly with what you already have. So not just your possessions, but even things like your family, your job, your nationality. Even if there are faults with these things, it's still necessary to be okay with them. Not exactly arrogantly proud of them, because we have already dispensed with such emotions, I'm sure, a long time ago. But we need to be content enough with what we have to avoid us always seeing the grass on the other side of the fence as greener. If we are content and we actually like what we have, then we will have the opposite of laziness, which is we will be inspired to do something about it. It's like if you hate your house, you won't want to decorate it, right? But if you're content with your house, even though it's quite a humble place, then you start to be in the mood to actually do something with it. So that is where contentment actually inspires you to action rather than making you lazy. Yeah? Not being content with having paint peeling off the walls. Understood? So it manages to channel what you have into making things better in a way. Secondly, there is contentment with what you receive. And there's contentment with what is appropriate to you, which might sound a little bit confusing. I'll give you some examples in a minute, but the sort of things that might affect what is appropriate might be your status, your potential, or your level of morality. And to give an example of what might not be appropriate to you, I don't know if you ever read about the fates of various lottery winners. Lottery winners ought to be really happy and be able to turn over a new leaf in their lives, right? Wrong. A lot of people, it's the start of a huge downfall in their life. Before they were just sort of going along quite happily, and suddenly when a whole bunch of money appears in their lives, it can be a real nightmare for them. Some people who win the lottery and they have such a shock that they have a heart attack. Yeah. They never believed it would be true. So when we're talking about appropriate, let's say it's a homeless person suddenly wins the lottery and they have a heart attack, then you have to ask yourself, well, what would have been appropriate for that person then? What would have been something that would really have helped them if it wasn't a whole load of money? Some gentle sort of help that would keep them going, perhaps, and maybe guide them gently towards a different pathway in life. There's some people, they win the lottery and suddenly they find out about hundreds of relatives they never knew they had. Before, no one was interested in them at all. But now they're a lucky lottery winner, everyone wants a piece of it. And it's a nightmare for them. So obviously the word appropriate has to be considered carefully. And sometimes if you come across some great good fortune in your life, you also need to be ready to handle it as well. So this very briefly might be what we would call appropriate in this particular case. I'll tell you a little story, I think. It's a favorite story from one of our teachers in Thailand called the Venerable Tatachiwo. And I have a picture to go with it. It's a little story of rags and riches. And it illustrates the point about being content with what comes to you. And the story concerns really the businessman in the picture. The businessman in the picture, actually, he was the Minister of Commerce for Thailand. And he came from a family who came from a long line of, you might call it, old money. But people with their head screwed on quite well, financially speaking. And in his family there was a tradition that they would never pass a beggar on the street without helping them in some way. So if anyone ever asked for something, then they would always help in some way, even if it was a lot or a little, depending, but they would always help in some way. It was like their family tradition. And this particular morning, the minister was up early on his way to work, and he passed a beggar on the corner. And he had a look in his pocket for some loose change, and there wasn't any. So he had to get out his wallet, and the smallest note in there was a $5. So he gave the $5 to the beggar on the street. And the beggar was over the moon with this. He was so grateful that he bowed down on the pavement at the feet of the minister, and he exclaimed that he'd been begging since childhood, and today was the first time anyone had been so generous to him, and his eyes shone with appreciation. And this made a very cheery and delightful start to the day for the minister, to make someone so happy for such a small investment. But when he reached his office, the ministry, he met a bank manager with a very pained expression on his face. And the minister asked him whether he was perhaps ill. He looked so much like he hadn't slept for many days. And he confessed that he was so upset that he hadn't slept all week. And the reason for that was he told his son earlier in the year to order a product that was bound to be scarce from the market. But the son didn't believe the father at first, so he delayed the order. So in the end, the first order ended up being ahead of the competition, but only the first order. The second and third orders, they'd lost their market share. So if he'd followed the father's advice, the son would have had a profit of 100 million this year. But because he hesitated, he only managed to have a profit of 60 million. So they lost 40 million they could have had. So the minister expressed his condolences and went into his office, but that day he could hardly get any work done because he was busy musing about the ways of the world, and a beggar who is happy all day long with $5 or pounds, and a banker who cannot sleep because he only got a profit of 60 million. So he sat and wondered that even if he changed all the policies and made miraculous reforms as the Minister of Commerce, whether anyone would actually be happier in the country as a result. So contentment in this sense takes on a rather different meaning, which is rather like finding contentment in a way that will bring you happiness, but also a sense of abundance in your life. I'll leave you perhaps with an idea of Benjamin Franklin's here, that contentment can make poor men rich, whereas discontent makes rich men poor. But the poverty they have is not a poverty in physical means, but it's a poverty about how they feel with what they have. Yeah? So the beggar with £5 feels rich, whereas the rich man with just 60 million feels poor. The only difference between the two is the amount of contentment they feel towards their situation. And to sort of add insult to injury, if you want to talk about poverty in the world, there's two sorts of poverty as well. There's the sort of poverty for people who really have a need which is not being fulfilled. And sometimes that's been referred to as temporary poverty, because it's a sort of poverty where before long, once the material goods turn up, once the need is fulfilled, then those people will recover their way to wealth again. But there is another sort of poverty which is much more difficult to solve, possibly not possible to solve at all. And that is the sort of people who want more and more without end. No matter how much you give them, they're never going to be satisfied with that. It's like a bottomless pit. It's like these sort of rulers of nations, and they already rule the whole country, but you ask them, would you like to rule the country next door as well? Of course they would. No, even more. Or they're in the sort of top 10 billionaires in the world, and you ask them, would you like to increase your net worth again? And they say, of course they would. Like to be like number 3 in the top 10 instead of number 4. And no matter how much they get, it's still not enough. And helping out that sort of poverty is probably something which no one could ever manage to do. So really, if people can be content with especially knowing moderation, knowing when enough is enough, or knowing not to spend beyond your means, for example, then this is really the most effective way to overcome poverty through the simple learning of that skill of contentment. So today we've seen very briefly that contentment can be useful in spiritual ways. Why? Because it allows you to like what you have in a way that you want to work on it. Like yourself enough to want to develop yourself spiritually even further, rather than focusing on the results. Because the results come not from focusing on them, but from putting in the footwork. And from the point of view of economics, contentment is also very important because it helps us to feel rich even though we might be just moderately okay. And contentment, if you are already rich, well, it helps you to know moderation. Yes, indeed. So that is normally the 1 hour's worth, which I would give to DMEU. And generally DMEU like a little bit of a public service announcement or two as well. So I will say that I encourage everyone to meditate further if they are not already doing so, trying to find 20 minutes at least to meditate each day. If you're not sure of the meditation technique, then you can help yourself to what is known as the MindGem app, which you can download onto your cell phone or mobile phone and listen to audio tracks, which will lead you through meditation. There are now hundreds of those. So yes, by the time you listen to all of them, you probably will be an expert in meditation. Here in Woking, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you're not near Woking, you might wonder why I'm telling you this. But they go out online as well. So those of you who might be scattered around various places in Europe that don't have a nearby center can follow along with those teachings via YouTube or even Facebook from the temple. And we have the Katina Ceremony coming up in this temple on the 23rd of October, Sunday the 23rd. Everyone's invited. We expect to have about 300 or 400 people joining this year. Last year we were still all in our face masks. This year, hopefully, we are back to full steam ahead again with all the congregation who've been thinking about for so long but not being able to meet up with. And DMEU goes out every Saturday between 7 and 8 on British time, 8 and 9 on Central European time. And the next full moon meditation, online and also in person, will be on the 11th of October, which aligns with the Tuesday, and it will be on the theme of the end of Buddhist Lent. Yes, indeed. So that is probably it for the DMEU. Don't know if you want to sign off for that or ask if they have any questions. If they don't, then I just sort of carry on. So it's me again. I will carry on where I left off. I have a few more stories about contentment. So a little bit connected with this idea of appropriateness. It's a little bit sounds a little bit strange in a country with high social mobility, apparently, where if you want to be something, you can just be it, right? So what is holding you back? You can be whatever you want to be. But there was a time long ago, it's a story from the